last year's presidential election and 8 months after warnings from within its own administration that the situation in Afghanistan was headed downhill, the Bush administration launched a new review of Afghanistan policy. Yet now, with a long list of Afghanistan war malfeasances under its belt, that government's loudest refugee, Dick Cheney, attacks President Obama again. And in our third story in the countdown, he accuses the president of dithering on Afghanistan. The latest salvo from the former vice president, who turned dithering into an art form last night at the Center for Security Policy in Washington, which gave Cheney an award, along with his former chief of staff, the convicted felon Scooter Libby. Mr. Cheney criticized Obama's national security policies, but seemed to marshal his greatest umbrage over his biggest failure, Afghanistan.
Having announced his Afghanistan strategy in March, President Obama now seems afraid to make a decision and unable to provide his commander on the ground with the troops he needs to complete the mission. The White House must stop dithering while America's armed forces are in danger. Make no mistake, signals of indecision out of Washington hurt our allies and embolden our adversaries.
Since it is a fact that Afghanistan's previous top commander, General David McKiernan, had submitted a request for more troops to then-President Bush, a request that went denied, the White House hit back today through its press secretary, Robert Gibbs.
It's a curious comment given, I think it's pretty safe to say that the vice president was for 7 years not focused on Afghanistan. Even more curious given the fact that a increase in troops sat on desks in this White House, including the vice president's, for more than 8 months. A resource request filled by President Obama in March. What Vice President Cheney calls dithering, President Obama calls his solemn responsibility to the men and women in uniform and to the American public. I think we've all seen what happens when somebody doesn't take that responsibility seriously.
And the Obama administration had to start its Afghanistan policy from scratch, according to White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel, a point which reportedly infuriated certain former Bush officials, including Mr. Cheney. With other failures, like former Defense Secretary Rumsfeld in attendance, Mr. Cheney said that the Bush administration had given the Obama transition team its Afghanistan review and agreed with the Obama team's request to keep it quiet. But after the Bush administration screwed up the effort in Afghanistan, perhaps Obama's team thought it best to perform its own assessment. After all, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs testified in December of 2007, quote, "In Afghanistan, we do what we can. In Iraq, we do what we must. Our main focus militarily in the region and the world right now is rightly and firmly in Iraq." A year later, the draft national intelligence estimate, still under President Bush, had confirmed what many experts already knew, except the idiots inside the White House. Afghanistan was in a downward spiral. The NIE's conclusions represent a harsh verdict on decision-making in the Bush administration. And this postscript, the breathless coverage of Cheney's newest critique, was covered before he gave that speech by Fox News, which had received an exclusive advanced transcript of the Cheney speech. That's what happens for outlets that are media arms of the GOP. Let's bring in Washington Post associate editor, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, and MSNBC political analyst Eugene Robinson. Gene, I haven't seen you in forever. How are you?
It's great to be here, Keith. You know, it has been a long time since you and I were both on this broadcast at the same time.
Yes,
it's great to see you.
Yeah. Well, we could spend an hour cataloging the warnings about Afghanistan during the latter years of the Bush administration. Former Secretary of State Rice, Defense Secretary Gates warned about it in February of last year, 2008. On the Obama side of the ledger, though, the president approved a troop increase in March. He's considering another. With that kind of pile of evidence running against him, what was Mr. Cheney trying to achieve? Do you have any idea?
I thought about it, Keith. Maybe he was just trying to make us all realize how much we missed him. It makes absolutely no sense. This is the man who is perhaps most responsible for our having abandoned the Afghanistan mission, turned to the utterly irrelevant and unnecessary Iraq mission, and allowed Afghanistan to slide into the parlous state that the Obama administration now defines it. The idea that he could criticize anyone on Afghanistan strategy and then suggest that, oh, well, the Obama team should have just taken the Bush administration's wisdom about the place. Well, they didn't have much wisdom about the place, and anyone with half a brain would have done their own assessment, since the Bush team, frankly, screwed it up.
Yeah, it seems to me that if it were open, psychotherapists would bid high money for the rights to analyze Mr. Cheney in public on these issues that he himself screwed up so much. But maybe we should have asked this larger question first. Why is anybody still listening to this man on this or any related field?
It's a good question. He's a former vice president. He is he says incendiary and often crazy things, and I think it's like a moth to a flame. We tend to be drawn to people with fancy titles and pedigrees who say outrageous things, and so we pay attention to Dick Cheney, even though if you think about what he's saying for 5 minutes, you wonder, why is this worth coverage? Why is this news? And why should we trust his credibility on this issue or on many issues at all?
And of course, this speech was detailed on Fox last night before he gave it, and having received a precious exclusive copy, they ran with it. What is the point of that? You're firing up a decreasingly sized base?
Well, I guess. First of all, you find an outlet that will air your views breathlessly and repeatedly, and take them seriously. And I guess the idea is to continue to fire up the base. Well, I think the far right base is pretty fired up already. The problem is it's in absolute terms pretty small, and I don't think you win the hearts and minds of independents and even moderate Republicans with this sort of attack, especially one that doesn't make any sort of literal sense.
So just from the political point, the idea is then to fire up every last troglodyte in hopes of putting a dent in the Democrats in some midterm votes somewhere next year. Get one House seat back. Maybe you get a few House seats back. I don't know how many you get from this sort of attack. Maybe if you're Dick Cheney, it makes you feel good. Maybe it makes you feel as if you still have support and you were right all along, and there are cheering legions who agree with you. But there I go. I'm doing that sort of pop psychoanalysis of the guy, which is what this whole situation invites. It really is a bizarre thing for a former vice president to be doing. Put your bid in a sealed envelope, leave it at the receptionist's desk. She'll be happy to take care of it for you.
I'll pay some money for that. I'll pay some money.
Gene Robinson, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist of the Washington Post and also with MSNBC. Thank you, Gene.
Great to be here, Keith.